In this video I'll be demonstrating how my tachometer is currently installed. This is basically an update to the other video I did about how to install a tachometer. The reason I'm doing this video is because since that video I've redone how the tachometer is installed, so I want to demonstrate that to everyone so everyone will know the proper way to hook it up. One thing I've changed about the tachometer install since my last video was how the tachometer is mounted. Before I had the tachometer mounted more over this way and it was pretty loose and it was easy to turn it side to side. Now I have it mounted better, I've moved it over more, and now as you can see it's pretty stiff. So to me this is the perfect spot to mount it on this car because for one thing it's not in the way of the AC vents over here, it's not in the way of any of the the cluster, and I have it over just enough so I could see it while I'm driving. Another thing I've changed is how I have the wire run. Before I had it running down to right beside the radio, and now I have it actually running down around the steering column. This is actually a good place to run it because it doesn't get smashed or interfere if you move the steering wheel up and down. As you can see, it doesn't interfere at all. Another thing I've changed since my previous tachometer install video is the way the wires are connected. For example, alright, I have the wires running down here by the steering column, as you can see right here. If you look over here, you can see I have all the wires in these little connectors. The way these connectors work is you have a female side and a male side. So as you can see, this is the male side, this is the female side. Okay, the male side is the one that connects inside the female side. When you're connecting these, you want to have the female side on the wire that's hot and the male side on the wire that doesn't produce power, the one that receives the power. The reason for this is because with this female connector, none of the metal's exposed, so if you have it disconnected and it touches something, it won't short anything out. Whereas with this one, if this touches something, there's no power running to it, so it can't short anything out. So I got all of them in those connectors, and that's good so that if you decide to take the tachometer out for some reason, it's very easy to take out. Alright, so from the connectors up here, the way I have the wire running is it comes down this way. It goes through a little loop because there's extra wire, so I just put in a little loop. The wire runs back here behind the little fuse box. And I'll show you where all the wires are running. First off, I'll start with the power to the tachometer, which is the red wire here. This one's running to the E connector on my fuse box. This gains power when you turn the ignition switch on. And I also have the white wire, which is the backlight to the tachometer, which is hooked up to the D connector. As you can see, in my original tachometer install video, I didn't have this wire hooked up, so now you can see where you should hook it up at. As I said, it's the D connector on the fuse panel. It should be the same for all 92 through 95 Civics and maybe other years. So that one gains power when you actually turn on the parking lights, and also when you have the headlights on and everything. So that's where you hook those up and where they're at. Some people believe that you actually have to put a fuse on the power wire for the tachometer, but you actually don't have to because this connector already is fused. The fuse for that connector is fuse number 23. which is this one right here, the little blue 15. So if this wire shorts out, it'll just pop the fuse. So you don't actually have to add another fuse. You could if you want to be safe, but you really don't have to. And that goes the same for this one. This one's also fused, the backlight wire. Now I'll show you where the ground wire is running, which is the same as the other video. It's one of the bolts for the clutch master cylinder. In the other video, I just had the wire. I had the sheath cut off the wire. I ran it around the bolt and then put the nut on. Since the video, I've done it the proper way, which is where you have a little connector, like you can see. And to give you a better idea of how this connector looks, you can see it right here. So you just put the wires in here, clamp it, and take off the nut. Put this on the bolt and screw it in. Before you do all that, you want to make sure that the area is clear of rust and that there's metal exposed, so it'll get a good connection. Then you just tighten it down real good, and that's it. That's the proper way you would ground that. Or you could always run it into a ground for something else, however you want to do it. Okay, now I'll show you where the green wire runs from the RPM, which is the signal for the RPM gauge to tell it how many RPMs it's at. This is up by the driver's side, by the firewall. The little connector is up here right next to the engine harness. As you can see, it's up there. In the previous video, I had it just directly running into this little connector right here. Since the video, I've actually just used one of these little splicers to splice the wire into the RPM wire. This is better than just having it run straight in there. So that's why I have that run. I also got this little rubber boot around the hole, which is the way you want to do it instead of just having it run straight through the metal. This way it prevents it from shorting out. So again, it's just right up here on the driver's side, up by the firewall, right on top of the engine harness. It's a little blue wire. Okay, so to be able to access all the places you gotta run the wires up under here, there's two things you gotta remove. One is the knee bolster, which is just a metal piece which protects all the wiring and everything. It has two 10mm bolts, one there, one over here. After you take the bolts out, this whole thing, you just pull it back and it drops out. But before you're able to do that, the first thing you'll have to do is remove the kick panel, which is I have over there. It's a panel that covers all this. There's 3 screws it has in it, which are all Phillips head. One goes up here, the other goes here, and the other goes up there. After you take those out, you just grab the top of it and pull it, and it should just pop out, and then you just pull the whole thing out. And to show you the connectors again, this is the one that I use for the ground. This is the connector that I use for the fuse box. Okay. And this little rubber boot. This is the rubber piece that I used for the hole in the firewall, that the green RPM wire where it runs through the firewall. Like I said, having this prevents it from rubbing up against the metal and shorting out. You can get all these pretty much at any auto parts store relatively cheap.